Hey everybody, welcome back to Sparks Fire and Baling Wire. I'm going to put the crank in this engine today. Before I get into that, the other day I put up first video on the oil filter adapter. I'm drilling out the extra holes, getting extra oil flow through there. Just a cheap, free, not so much horsepower trick, but adds longevity to the engine, or it should anyway. But one of my viewers, he asked me how much it cost. This engine, I got $5,300 in at the machine shop. This one, many of you watch the videos on this, $300 at the machine shop. Pretty big difference. This engine, obviously, is only 4 cylinders, so half the cylinders. But the only thing I even took in there was the cylinder head, because the original reason this tractor had quit running was because it had dropped the valve seat out. So I brought it in, had new valve seats put in, all new valves, just basic head job. This one has liners in it, so there's no boring to it, and I replaced those myself. That was added cost. I reused the crank, the camshaft, all that was in good shape. So basically, this was bearings, rings, pistons, cylinders, or pistons and liners, and the money I stuck in the head. I don't know what the entire tally was on that. Doesn't matter. It's more than the tractor's worth. Back to this. My machine shop bill is $5,300. Like I said, I was boring it out. I just bored it out to what it took to clean the cylinders up. This engine was stuck when I got it. Stuck pretty bad. And they got by with only 40 thousandths overbore, so I was pretty happy with that. Cleaned everything up. Line honed the mains. They did not take anything off the deck surface. They checked everything. It was all checked out good, so they just left it as is, just cleaned it up. Put all new cam bearings in it, all the core plugs, gallery plugs. That was it for the block. The heads, they heavily ported, that's where a lot of the money was. Oversized valves, hardened seats for the exhaust so they don't burn them up. Along with the valves, new springs, seals, all the basics there too. The crank and connecting rods I took to them. They determined what pistons I needed and ordered them, so they supplied the pistons. That was part of the $5,300. And they balanced the crank and rods for me. That's all they did, nothing assembled. As you're seeing, I'm obviously doing that myself. See if I'm missing anything. They didn't exactly itemize everything, but clean the block, check the block, which would be Magnaflex, and checking for cracks. Bore and hone. That was $250. Line board, that was only $32. Install cam bearings, $75, which I'd assume included the cost of the cam bearings. The plugs, the core plugs, that was $25. See if anything stands out here. $200 to balance the crank, $40 to pin fit the rods, $200 for the valve job itself. Porting the heads was $1,000. Flow testing them was $100. They did mill the heads, that was $100. The pistons were $1,071. Piston rod, or the piston pins, were $122. Rings $236. Milling the intake, they trued that up to fit. That wasn't the best fit out of the box either. That was $100. Everything else is small stuff, 1,000 or less, but the grand total on it came to $5,311.78 at the machine shop. If you're on a budget, that's probably going to determine how far you're going to go with your engine build. I could have done this in basically stock or slightly over stock for, probably could have done the complete engine for what I've already got in it just at the machine shop. That's not counting piles of parts back there that I bought on my own. I don't know what the total is involved in this either, and I'm probably not gonna check. I'm just going with the buy once, cry once theory. Now I have an engine when I'm done. Let's get it rolled back over there in the corner and start putting crank in. Alright, I'll get this thing rolled over here. I got this filter screwed on there just to keep dirt out. Not even sure what it goes to, but it fit on there. It's not the right one for this engine. It'll serve its purpose keeping the dirt out. Later on I won't have to worry about masking that off when I paint it. Got a set of bearings. Thrust bearing go over here in the middle. Wider ones in the back. The rest there, it doesn't matter which is which. These are all pretty self-explanatory. You got an oil hole here, lines up with the ones in the block. I've already brushed these out, blew them out good, cleaned them up. Want to make sure everything's clean as can be. Just push them in, line the tangs up. Here's the bottom half. The only difference really is the bottom half has the groove in it and the oil hole, where the cap end is just a solid bearing surface. Number 3 will be the thrust bearing. It's got a machined surface there for the thrust part, so that's the only easily defined cap. That's why it's important. Like I said before, these caps are stamped from the factory, or I should say cast from the factory. But if you don't have them markings, make sure you mark it before you take it apart, because it's very important that these go back on the same order they came out. Okay, the machine shop did a beautiful job getting this all cleaned up and ready to go for me too. I am going to take a brush and go through all the oil journal holes before I stick it on there though. You always want to very carefully set that in there. Next thing I'm going to do is get some plastic gauge. Check all the bearing clearances. Never use plastic gauge, this is it. There's a little plastic string inside there. You cut them down, lay them on there, crank your caps down, and it'll squish that out flat, and then you just compare it to the little chart here and it'll tell you what your clearance is. There's a little string right there. It's pretty fine. So I'll just cut a piece to lay on each cap. I'm going to get it right on top. I don't want it off to the side. I want to get as accurate a reading as possible with it. All the caps are now torqued to 110 foot-pounds, which is what they're supposed to be for the final. And it's very important when you do this, make sure the crankshaft does not turn. Now you just line up plastic gauge with the corresponding mark on the sheet. Kind of right in between them two, so a little over 1.5 thousandths, not quite 2 thousandths. I'm going to say that's probably pretty good. A little tougher to get in here on these. I'm not even going to try and get the camera on that one. About the same there. I'm really happy with everything we got here. Between 1.5 and 2 on all of them. The front two are a little closer to 2. That's still really good. So now I got to get all this scraped off and get it cleaned up. A little bit sticks on the main bearing on the cap too, so I have to clean that off too. It's just scratch it off with the fingernail, wipe it down. It's good to go. And we'll be ready to put some assembly lube in here, clamp it down for the final time, and the crank will be finished. Gave everything one final wipe down, one final cleaning. Next step's going to be get the rear main seal put in. Bottom half just drops in this groove here. Just press that down in. Not a whole lot to it. Lip goes that way, towards the front of the engine. So that way any oil trying to get out will hit that lip, and dead end there, no leaks guaranteed, right? Now for the cap, that's going to be a little more stubborn. It's got these wings that stick out the sides here. So we're going to take a little oil. They don't want to press down in there. I guess one side does. That side, yeah, I think I'm just going to get some oil so I don't fight it. Just going to use some light engine oil here. There it goes. These are raised up a little bit here, oversized. So when you torque that cap down, it's kind of going to crush it in there and provide the seal we need. Same goes with the ends here where they made up. So there's no need for gasket seal or anything like that, because that just, these are all pretty tight clearances on this machine surfaces here. So you don't want to interfere with that if you don't have to. I'm even wiping off the excess oil here because I don't want that to interfere with my final assembly. So now I'll start putting some assembly lube in all these bearings and get the crank dropped in. I'm using this stuff right here, Lubriplate 105 motor assembly grease. There's different greases, light oils. There's a wide variety of products you can use. I don't know that one's any better than the other. This is just what I happen to have, so this is what I'm using. Just dab a little on there and smear it around. Make sure the whole bearing surface is coated good. The middle one here, your thrust bearing, both the front and rear faces of that are bearing surfaces, so make sure those get coated too. Some people overlook that part. It's probably not super critical for startup, but why chance it? This is just a light grease too. Pretty good chance I could have got by with using that same assembly lube I'm using on the bearings. This was supplied, so I might as well use it. Rock it back and forth, it's good. I'm not turning the crank completely over yet because I don't want to get a bunch of lube up on the top side from that bottom half of the bearing. That will squish out on the caps when I put them on. So I want to wait till I have all the caps at least snug down before I make full rotations on that crank. No reason for the order I'm going in, I just happened to pick up that cap, that's why I jumped up to number 1 here. I was watching a video the other day, just as a refresher before I came to do this. The guy put his bearing shells in, put his assembly lube on, dropped his crank in, then proceeded to do the plastic gauge, and was happy with his 1/1000th clearance. I don't like that method at all because that assembly lube is essentially shimming the crankshaft up. So you're not getting a true reading of your clearance on each of your bearings that way. He was happy with just reading 1/1000ths or a little over per bearing, but I wouldn't sleep good at night doing that. There's the last cap and it is snug. So now I'll go ahead and do some complete rotations. Basically all I'm doing here is checking to see if I feel anything binding up, if it turns harder at one point than another. And it's just smooth as glass. Couldn't be happier here. So now we'll go ahead and start torquing them down. Do the 3 steps again until I get to 110 foot-pounds. Mainly what I'm doing here, thrust bearings in the middle. That's what keeps your crankshaft from trying to go front to back. It's really critical if you got a manual transmission. Every time you push in on your clutch pedal, you're trying to force that crank forwards. So it's going to ride on that thrust face on that bearing. So I pry it back and forth to center it up. Your caps are sitting in a machine pocket, which is good side to side, but it does nothing front to back. So I pry between the counterweights both ways, but the last way I do is pushing it forward. Not that I don't have a manual transmission, but if I did, that's the thrust I'm going to be pressing on the most, so that's the one I want to set it to. That's all the way forward, zeroed out. That's all the way back, about 5.5 thousandths. I'm going to call that pretty good. I don't know exactly what the specs are, but I'd say it's right in there. I'll call this a job well done. I think I'm going to end this video right here. Thanks for watching. Hit that like button, subscribe, drop your comments down below. I always appreciate that. Especially when I get a viewer that catches something I missed. That saved me before and it'll probably save me again. Thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you all next time.